That old term, what's old is new again, seems to apply with a technique that I've seen floating around on social media, and it's the embossing technique. Now, embossing is something that we did probably 30 plus years ago in production, and we did it on apparel and on hats. Now, we had a bunch of recipes that I used many years ago, and I think they're going to be really helpful for you today. Now, if you like these types of videos, be sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you're notified every time we release a new video. Now, first I'll go over some of the things we're going to use, and there's two different options. In the old days, with regards to stabilizers, we had our tearaway and our cutaway stabilizers, and that's pretty much all we used. So back then, I would have used a traditional tearaway, but things have changed a lot in the last 30 years. I now have a tearaway that actually has a tacky side to it. So it's paper on one side, tearaway on the other. I can score the paper and I have a wonderful tacky surface so that I don't have to use my spray adhesive. In the old days, I would have used a regular tearaway with spray adhesive. Now, the other thing I'm going to use is just a regular piece of a cutaway stabilizer. So if you don't have the tacky, you can resort to the other two, but it's really basic as far as the stabilizers you're going to need. Now, I have a piece of 3D foam. This is a standard foam that you will use for doing regular 3D embroidery on a hat, but we're not going to be putting the foam on top. We're going to be placing the foam underneath. I have my hoop, I have a bit of painter's tape, a T-square, a T-pin, scissors, all that regular stuff, and I'm just going to use a regular 40 weight thread. We're also going to use a flat home machine, keeping in mind that if you have a tubular machine with that arm, it's going to make the whole process a lot easier because all your fabric is going to hang out of the way. We're going to have to be a little bit creative, dig a bit of a bowl, and make sure that our placement is good for this item. So we're going to have a little bit more of hands-on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hoop and I'm going to actually hoop my stabilizer. This is the tacky tearaway, which actually has the paper side. The paper side is going to be face up. And I'm going to make sure that I hoop this as tightly as possible because we are not going to hoop the garment within this technique. We're going to float it on top. And that's why it's important that there is either spray adhesive or a tacky surface that it's going to adhere to. So I'm going to place this so the paper is face up, and then I'm just going to put it in there and I'm going to push down. And then once it is in place, I'm going to make sure that I go all the way around the hoop and make sure that it is inset to the hoop as much as possible. I don't want it to move. And then after I have that done, I'm going to go to the area where I can tighten the hoop, and I'm going to tighten it as much as I possibly can so I'm not going to get any movement. Once that's in place, this is where I'm going to take my T-pin and I'm just going to lightly score around the edge of the entire hoop, not pressing too hard. I do not want to go through both the paper and the stabilizer. I just want to go through the paper itself, and I'm going to go lightly around and just score it. And then once it's scored, I'm going to remove the paper around this area so that I have a tacky surface. So once it's scored, I'm going to try to get in here and make sure that I just grab the paper side. I don't want to hit the stabilizer too much. All of that paper, get as much of it out as possible. And I want as much of a tacky surface as possible so that the fabric is going to adhere to this and it's going to give me a better embossed result. Now I'm going to take this piece and I'll put it onto the machine so that it will be ready to embroider, and then I can get the placement ready on my sweatshirt. Now with my sweatshirt, I have the area at the bottom where the body is, and this is where I want to make sure that I put it underneath the machine so as much of the excess material is hanging off the back side of the machine. So I have to plan this a little bit ahead. I also want to do my placement beforehand, so I'll lay out my garment, and then what I found is a very easy way to do placement in a situation like this is to take this little template that actually comes with your machine, and that way I can use it and kind of use those horizontal and vertical lines to make sure that my placement for this is going to be just about perfect, and I can just measure, finger width and make sure I'm from the center and the center of the pocket. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some painter's tape, and I'm going to mark each of these edges so that these little notches that I see here, and there's little notches in your hoop, I can just line up my painter's tape to those notches and make sure that it's going to be centered. So I'll take 4 small pieces, and I'll just remember that I'm going to mark it maybe from the bottom up. So that's 1 notch. Here's another notch. And here, if I want to come into a little corner, I can just do the corner piece for the center. And I'll do another one where I have like a little corner coming in, and I'll place it just like that. So this just gives me a visual aid for when I'm going to place this onto the hoop after it does the first piece. So that is pretty much it. I am ready with my horizontal and vertical placement. Now I just have to take the design on the machine, make sure that it is turned the right direction. I want to make sure that the top of the design is going to be towards the top of the frame, and that all my material will be hanging outside of the machine, not towards the inside. So the design is in there. I'm going to drop my needle bar down, hit the go, and the first thing it's going to do is a very loose running stitch that is going to show me where to place my foam. Now I'm going to take my piece of foam and I'll just put it underneath, and I'll make sure that it covers both of the ends at the front and the back. Because it's a little tacky, it'll just lay in place. This next stitch is going to be the stitch that's going to help to perforate the foam, and it will be very, very easy with the recipe that I use to tear off. Now that the foam is cut, I'm going to take the hoop off the machine, and I'm going to turn it over to the back side. And at this point, I'm going to make sure that I put my piece of cutaway stabilizer on the back. This is actually going to hold the foam in place while it finishes the rest of the design. If you forget this step, your shirt will look perfectly good until you wash it a couple times, and then the foam will probably fall apart out of the back side. So you want to make sure at this point you take your piece of cutaway, and I'm just going to put it in place securely on either side, just like that, making sure that it's not close to the stitching. Then I'm going to turn this over, and this is where I'm going to grab my little T-pin if I need it. And because of the recipe we use, I'm going to hold the foam down inside the letter, and I'm going to very gently start pulling it away around the outside. And this is where I've seen in videos a lot of other people who've done the embossing technique are really struggling to get all of the little nooks and crannies and all of the little pieces within the design to actually break free. And we've designed this so that it actually will cut away pretty easily, so that all you have to do is pull. You don't have to use, for the most part, any tools for weeding that you normally would use with vinyl and stuff like that. It should pull away nice and easily, but I'm holding down my foam in the areas that I want to be maintained so that it doesn't lift up. And then I just continue to go around the outside and just pulling up a little bit. Right in that little tiny area, it's getting into every single nook and cranny, except for that one, which I'll have to go in with my T-pin. And I just will continue to pull, and if you look, it's cut away almost perfectly. I have one little area here that does need to be brought up, and it comes in just like that. So I have a perfectly cut piece here within my design. And now I can put this back onto the machine. It's tacky all the way around so that my fabric is going to sit to it. And now we can get our shirt set up so that we can actually put it onto the machine. Now I'm going to use our Echidna hooping station for this part because I'm going to find it a lot easier to take this hoop and put it in place and get the shirt all set up exactly where I want it, dig my little bowl, and then try to place it in the machine. If I try to do that entire process while it's actually underneath on a flat table, it would probably take 10 times longer and I wouldn't have a specific result. Now I'm going to take my hoop and I'm going to take my little magnets and I'm just going to kind of center this almost where I think it should be. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to just make sure that it's being held in place with the magnets so that it's not going to move, and that way I'll be able to just slide my sweatshirt over top and get the placement exactly where I want it. This is going to make the whole process much easier than trying to hoop it without a hooping station. So I'm just going to take the shirt and carefully bring it over top, and there is my markers, and if I put my hand underneath and get some of that stabilizer kind of pushed down, because that paper stabilizer is poking up on the four corners, so I just want to make sure everything is nice and flat. Then I can feel with my fingers, right here is where that notch is that I want to line up. Same thing on the other side, so I know I have to pull it down a little bit, and I'm just going to feel on that hoop. Here's one part right here, and then on the other side, here's the other part right there. I know it has to move over a little bit, and that pretty much is centered on the design. So I'm just using those markers that I preset. I can feel in the middle, that one's lining up, that one's lining up, and then I'm going to just push down on the material because it is tacky, and I will push and make sure that all of it is adhered to that stabilizer, go in between some of the letters if I can, just make sure that it's going to be held in nice and smoothly. I'll probably, before I press the start button on the machine, give it a little once over, but now that it's in place, now I can actually, while it's still in the hooping station, bring all of these pieces kind of forward and over the top of the actual hoop, so I'm creating my bowl. It's so much easier to create this little bowl within the hooping station than it is trying to do it while it's already underneath the machine. So there I have it in place. I know that it's going to go back into the machine in this direction, and I'll just very easily bring it over here, and I will take all of the excess material, start moving it out of the way and bringing it underneath of the needle and just working it one piece at a time so that I know it's going to be in towards the center. Then I'll come here and just look for where my hoop starts, and same thing. I'm just going to get the hoop inset there, and then I can start guiding it within the path and making sure that everything is out of the way and in place. Then I make sure that I lock it in place, and now I can just start going all the way around again, making sure that everything is still flat. I'm going to be watching every single step moving forward because, as I can see, I have all of this material sort of hanging out of the way here. I just want to make sure that I position it so that it's going to not interfere with anything that's going to sew as it moves around within the hoop. So that looks nice and flat, and I'm ready to start for my last color. Now I'm going to drop the needle down, and we'll just hit the go button, and I'll just make sure that I stand by and watch the machine run these last steps. Now the design is done. We're just going to remove the hoop. And again, we just have to make sure that we carefully get it underneath of the needle. So now that the design is done, before I remove it, I'm just going to go to the back side here and cut away my stabilizer. Because this is cut away, this is what's going to make sure that it holds that foam in place that's giving it the embossed look. And if you do notice any creasing between your letters, you can take a smaller pair of scissors and you can just cut a little line between each of the letters, and that way when it does actually launder, any little creases that are there are going to automatically disappear. So I'm just cutting the cutaway between each letter. And then I can remove my hoop. And it is still tacky, so I'm just going to pull away. And then because this is a tearaway, it should tear away very cleanly to the rest of the design. Get rid of any other little pieces. I could clean that up a little bit more if I wanted to. Now if I look at this, I can take off my painter's tape that I use for the alignment, and I have a design that is perfectly embossed. So that's our embossed design. A few quick and easy steps, very low stitch counts. It looks great when it's done, and it will launder really, really well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you're notified every time we release a new video. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time.